Hello, prospective classicists. Welcome to Classical Civilization at Buller's Wood. I'm Miss Brown, and I'm going to talk you through our virtual Classical Civilization A-Level Induction Day. This is obviously very different to how I would want to give you a taster of our A-Level, but I do hope that you come away with a clear idea of what your Classical Civilization A-Level might look like. So I really wanted to start with why studying classical civilizations is so important. This is a new subject for most, if not all of you, I would imagine, so it's important that you really appreciate its value. So Classical Civilizations at A-Level is, in essence, the story of the birth of democracy. It really laid the foundations for today's Western world, and the wealth of knowledge that classical thinkers, classical writers, scientists, philosophers had is just extraordinary. So much of our society today can be traced back to the classical era, and therefore I really think that Classical Civilizations gives you such a sound understanding of the world around you. I also think that it trains you to think really critically, something that is so vital to succeed in all walks of life. Today, obviously, we live in a world of fake news, politicians pushing their agendas, and really Classical Civilizations helps you to question what you are told. It also teaches you to argue successfully by supporting your view with evidence and facts, and it's for these reasons that universities and employers really love people who have studied it. So as a newfound classicist, you should have a passion for reading because we're going to be reading plays and ancient texts. It's pretty likely that you'll love reading fiction, but it is just as important that you feel confident reading non-fiction so that we can start to build up our understanding of the ancient world. It's also really important that you're prepared to develop as a learner and move beyond the skills that you would have learnt at GCSE. As obviously this is a new subject for a lot of you, you will need to dedicate some time to building your awareness of the ancient world, and you do really need to have a passion for the subject to do this. So what is the course? I really think it's an exciting course actually. It will give you a huge flavour of the classical world, and it will set you up beautifully for studying classical civilizations at university, if that's something that you choose to do. We are going to study then the epics of Homer and Virgil. One then from the ancient Greek world, which is Homer's epic, the Odyssey, and one from the world of ancient Rome, which is Virgil's Aeneid. We also delve into the world of Greek tragedy and comedy, something that was so important to Athenian culture that week-long play festivals were dedicated to the performance of these plays. You'll also study Greek religion, which will expand your understanding of Olympian deities, something that I know is very popular. But we'll also go further than this. We're going to start explaining the intricacies of the relationship between Athenians and religion. You can see on the screen here each of the 3 papers that you will sit and the amount that they are worth. So you can see, for example, that the epics are worth 40%, whereas the tragedy paper and the theatre paper is worth 30%, as is the Greek religion paper. You sit all of those 3 exams then at the end of year 13, and over the next couple of slides I'm just going to outline quickly one of the epics and a couple of the plays that you're going to be studying to give you a flavour of what it will be like studying classics. So the world of the hero then is the first paper really that you'll come into contact with. You study 2 epics, as I've said before, but I'm just going to introduce you today to the Odyssey. Homer's Odyssey then is something called an epic poem. It's something that was first told in around 800 BCE, and it's quite unique in the sense that Homer was an oral poet, which meant that he spoke his poetry. It wasn't written down until much, much later, and as a result the story has kind of developed over time. Now the story follows a man called Odysseus, hence why it's called the Odyssey, who, after fighting in the Trojan War for 10 years, embarks on his journey home to be reunited with his wife Penelope and their son, who is called Telemachus. Now Odysseus is such an interesting character because he really embodies this new style hero. Now, the traditional hero in Greek epic is characters such as Achilles, who you probably will actually have heard of. And they were really famed for their strength, for their bravery, and their sole purpose really was their quest for glory, or kleos as it's called in the Greek, which Achilles certainly got. He was one of the finest warriors that had ever been seen in Greece. He was the reason why the Greeks won the Trojan War. Odysseus, on the other hand, is highly intelligent. Cunning is often an epithet that he's given, like a nickname almost, and he does everything that he can really to avoid fighting or to avoid war. He's probably most famous in popular culture because he is the person that came up with the idea of the Trojan horse that finally defeated the Trojans. And if you don't know, Odysseus said that they were going to build this massive wooden horse that was supposed to be an offering to the gods, and all of the Greek soldiers hid inside that horse, and then the Greeks retreated. And then when the Trojans came out of their city walls, they saw this offering to the gods, and they took it inside their walls. And at night time then all of the Greek soldiers spilled out, and they were able to take over the city from the inside. Really highlights Odysseus's cunning, his intelligence, and that is something that it carries through the whole of the Odyssey. So his journey home then, after the Trojan War ends, takes 10 years. He's been at war for 10 years already. It takes him another 10 years to get home. And the Odyssey really then follows this journey. Odysseus encounters many gods, nymphs, monsters, lots of things that prevent him from getting back to his wife Penelope as quickly as he would like to. Now, perhaps one of the most famous motifs in the Odyssey is the scene that you can see on the screen. Now, this is a mosaic. It's not from the time. It's a representation afterwards. But this is Odysseus then on his journey home, where he encounters some women who are kind of women, half monsters, who sing, and they're called the Sirens. And their song then lures sailors to their deaths. They hear the call of the Sirens, and they are lured to a certain point, and then the Sirens kill them. Now, Odysseus is very desperate to hear this song because it's supposed to be very beautiful, but obviously if he hears the song he'll be drawn towards the Sirens and then he will die. So what he does is he lashes himself to the mast of his ship, which you can see in that picture there, and he instructs the rest of his crew around him to stuff beeswax in their ears to protect them from the lure. And as a result, Odysseus is able to experience this song that no living other man has ever heard, through his cunning, through his intelligence, by lashing himself to the mast. I think you'll really enjoy studying it. It's such a brilliant epic. And one that, again, has a lot of influences in popular culture. Now, the second epic on the screen there, the Aeneid, is from the Roman times. And I'm not going to talk about that today because you'll likely do that in year 13 as opposed to year 12. But that is a Roman epic, and Virgil really styled that whole epic, the Aeneid, on the Odyssey, and also Homer's other epic, which is called the Iliad. Now, this is one of my favourite things to learn about and to teach as well, really. And this is Greek theatre. Greek theatre is wonderful, and I'm certain that you will grow to love it, as I certainly do. You can see the 3 plays on the board then. These are plays that were performed, and they are Oedipus the King, the Bacchae, and Frogs, and they are set texts then that you'll study during the course. And you can see the names of 2 of the playwrights, called Sophocles and Euripides, and they're tragic playwrights, and the last one is called Aristophanes, who is a comedian, a comic playwright. Now, all of these 3 playwrights competed in something called the City Dionysia, which was a religious play festival that happened every year, and it staged competitions to crown the best comic and tragic playwright. And all 3 of those playwrights on the board won this competition at one point or another. Now, these play festivals had huge cultural significance. They had massive ties to religion, and they took over people's lives for at least a week. You'd get most of the citizens of Athens going to watch these play festivals. Just the men, obviously. Women were not allowed in the theatre. Now, I'm going to talk you through one of the plays, which I think is probably the most famous play to come out of the Athenian age, and that is Sophocles' Oedipus the King. So Oedipus then is the king of Thebes. Thebes is a city in Greece, and he is trying to save his city from a terrible plague when he learns that the city is suffering from the effects of a prophecy. And it emerges that the reason the plague has descended is because Oedipus himself has been the victim of another prophecy that was given by the fates. It was foretold that Oedipus was destined to murder his own father and marry his own mother. And indeed, this is exactly what happens. Oedipus murders his father Laius. He marries his mother Jocasta, who becomes his wife. And as a result, a terrible plague is rained down on Thebes because it was a huge crime to commit patricide and an even bigger crime to commit incest. Now, this story still really lives in popular memory today, thanks to Sigmund Freud, who you might have heard of, who has an Oedipus theory. And really, the sophistication of Sophocles' understanding of psychology is testament to the quality of the playwrights themselves. The Bacchae is another example, another tragedy, which is similarly gruesome. You'll find that lots of the Greek plays, Greek tragedies in particular, are very, very gruesome. Pentheus is the main character here, and he is punished for his impiety, his disrespect towards the god Dionysus. Dionysus is the god of the theatre and wine and kind of revelry. And as a result of that impiety, Dionysus puts a spell on his mother, who goes into something called a Bacchic revelry, which is a bit like a trance almost, along with lots of other women in Thebes. And those women, that group of women, lures Pentheus to their hilltop where they're revelling. And they tear him apart limb from limb. So Pentheus's mother Agave kills her own child, another heinous crime in Athenian culture. It just goes to show really the power of the gods and why you should always respect them, because any disrespect is going to be punished very, very severely. And finally then, we have the comedy category. The comic playwright Aristophanes, one of the finest comic playwrights to have come out of the ancient world, is an example of old comedy, which tends to be very satirical. It tends to be a very cutting, very political, a real reflection of what's going on at Athens at the time. Now his play, the one that we look at, is called The Frogs. And Dionysus rears his head again here. He's the god of the theatre again. And he is the protagonist. He's lamenting the poor quality of the tragedians at the play festival. So he decides that he wants to do something about it. He decides to travel to the underworld, and he decides he's going to bring back the three great playwrights, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Aeschylus is not on the screen here, but is considered one of the great tragic playwrights. And he's accompanied then by a chorus of frogs, obviously. And what Dionysus does is, in the underworld, he decides which playwright he thinks is the best, and he brings that one playwright up to the mortal world so that he can revive the great era of Athenian tragedy. Again, a really interesting play, and I think that you'll really enjoy it when we go ahead and study it. So hopefully that gives you a little flavour of the kinds of things that you might study, or you will be studying in fact. So I'm just going to talk to you quickly then about what you should be doing over the summer. So on the school website, you'll find the summer work that I would like you to have completed by your first lesson in September. And really the main purpose of this work, as I think I've said before, is that you come to your first lesson with some sort of picture in your head of what the classical world was actually like. You won't have obviously encountered it very much before, and therefore to come with that picture will really help you with your understanding of everything we do after that point. So you'll find a resource list on the summer work section, and there are a series of books, there's podcasts, there's TV shows, lots of things that will help you add to that picture in your mind of what the ancient world was actually like. I'd like you to access as many of them as you are able to. There are lots of fiction books there which are really interesting. Natalie Haynes's Stand Up for the Classics is a great podcast, which is the one that you can see on the screen, and she goes through in a lot of detail some of the characters that you might encounter in the ancient world. And what I'd like you to do is create a logbook, essentially, of all of the resources that you have used. And you're going to write a short summary or notes on those resources, and then I'd like you to bring that logbook to your first lesson. And what that will really show us is that you're fully committed to your study of classical civilizations, and it will really set you up well for the rest of the course. Some of the fiction books as well are wonderful, and I think you'll really enjoy them, so I would strongly recommend getting through as many as you can on that list. You do need to do at least 3, please, and I look forward to having a look at that in September. So I hope then that that's given you a flavour really of what studying classical civilizations might be like. I do hope that you have a really wonderful summer, and I'm very much looking forward to meeting you all in September.